This horror story occurred in the early 1900s, the night after Christmas. The weather outside had gotten worse this December than it had in previous years. In fact, the snow had made it nearly impossible to see on certain days. Charles was a professor, and he had to make the walk from his shift in the heart of town back home every evening. This change in weather made it sometimes unbearable, and so he would always try to find the shortest route home. One evening, after his long work shift at the office, he took an unusual path home, one that he had predicted would speed up his commute. On this path home, he encountered a train tunnel below his walk path. Out of curiosity, he peered down into the bottom of the steep railway cutting as the snow beat down on him. Charles noticed a signalman below, standing on the rail tracks, staring deep into the train tunnels. Now, it should be noted exactly what a signalman is. A signalman was a mentally taxing occupation that put the flow of the train system in the hands of this worker. A signalman's job was to operate the points and signals from a signal box in order to control the movements of trains. In other words, it wasn't entirely uncommon to see a signalman checking into the tunnels in which he controls. Nevertheless, Charles yells down to the man, "Hey you, below there." Charles notices the signalman slowly take his gaze off the inside of the dark tunnel and up to where Charles had shouted. Charles waves to the man with sincere intention, since they were both braving the snowy weather. The man slowly gazes back into the tunnels, then disappears into his post without acknowledging poor Charles. Charles, in puzzlement, decided to fearlessly trek the snowy path down to the workers' trench to get answers about the strange behavior. After a few knocks on the door to the workers' shack, the signalman opens. He appears to be bewildered at the sight of Charles. After a few exchanges, the signalman reluctantly allows Charles into his post. Charles can immediately notice how dismal his working conditions are. Hardly any light gets into his shack, other than the red signal light above the dark tunnel that shined through one small window. He could also immediately tell how terrified the signalman had been. He was apprehensive to talk, and his eyes were bloodshot, as if he had seen a ghost. After a few exchanges, the signalman lightened up with Charles. They spent a good few hours getting to know one another. Charles grew fond of this man and his wit. He could tell that the signalman was a very intelligent individual. That's why he was shocked when the signalman told him that he had been seeing things in the tunnel. To be more specific, he told Charles that he had seen an apparition and has been hearing it speak to him. He told Charles that he was one of his apparitions. Charles was an astute professor who assessed every situation with the utmost speculation. He grew worried about the signalman because he could tell the signalman was chilled down to his core at Charles's presence. Charles assured the man that he had never been to the railway, and in fact, this was his first time even taking this unusual path home. He was aware that the signalman's working conditions could easily be the culprit in draining his ability to rationalize reality. The signalman paused Charles and told him that he is not delusional and that he has seen the dark apparition on multiple occasions over the past few months. Each time he does see the apparition, it would utter that exact phrase that Charles hollered down to him. "Hey you, below there." Then wave its hand in the same pattern that Charles did. Charles looked into the man's sunken eyes and could tell that the man believed the words that he spoke. The signalman told Charles that he was utterly terrified that something was going to happen. He could not pinpoint what it was, but that this train track, more specifically the tunnel, housed something that he could not comprehend. To help Charles understand what he meant, the signalman explained that he witnessed a train being derailed, causing many passengers on board to die. He then said that he most recently witnessed a beautiful young woman tragically lose her life by committing suicide. The signalman explained that she had jumped to her death, actually from the exact point that Charles first said hello to him. The thought of these tragedies really chilled Charles, and he could tell that they played a massive role in the deterioration of the signalman's mental state. The signalman described the impact that the woman's suicide had on him. He clarified that he did everything he could. He pleaded with the woman and begged her not to jump, but it was far too late. Charles told the man that the burden of these tragedies should not lie on him. He told the signalman that he needed genuine human interaction, that he couldn't rely on himself to push through these depressions, and that he could tell that the variables of his working conditions, mixed with these tragedies, had led to cognitive decline. The signalman declined any cognitive issues, and once again assured Charles that something was here, something was following him. Although Charles thought the man was delusional, he did not want the signalman spending the Christmas holidays alone, and told him that he was going to continue to come back to check in on him over the next week or so. They shook hands, and Charles disappeared into the snow. The following evening, after his work shift, Charles went back to see the signalman, as he had promised. But as he peered down into the train tunnel from the path above, his stomach grew weak. He could see 4 men below there, covering a body up, just outside of the train tunnel. Charles rushed down the snowy path. He knew deep down that the body that was getting covered up was that of the signalman. He was right. As he approached the 4 men, he quickly picked up on the fact that 2 of them were police officers. The 2 policemen told him to keep back. Charles explained to them that he was a friend of the signalman and demanded to know what had happened. One of the bystanders cut into the conversation and described the death of the signalman. The bystander told Charles that he was taking his common nightly stroll when he peered into the railway cutting. He noticed the signalman just standing on the tracks, staring into the tunnel, as if he were in a trance. He explained that it was clear that a train was coming, as you could feel the vibrations of the rolling train, as well as hear the whistling from the train's horn. So he was unsure exactly why the man was standing on the tracks. The bystander then mentioned that he yelled down to the man on the tracks, "Hey you, below there." He then demonstrated waving his hand in an attempt to grab the man's attention. But by that time, he explained it was far too late, as the train crushed the signalman. The correlation between this man's story and everything the signalman had told Charles the night prior sent shivers down his spine. Charles opened his mouth to talk, but words would not come out. He then sees the last man in the group point behind him into the deep, dark train tunnel and speak up for the first time. The man tells Charles to watch out. Charles's reflexes kick in. He hunches over and turns toward the tunnel to protect himself. But there's nothing. Charles, with confusion on his face, turns back around. He sees only 3 men in front of him, looking equally confused by his strange behavior.